10 seconds. You guys can go when you see yourselves.
Hello, welcome to Track Talk Live this afternoon. I'm here with Doug.
Mr. Clickety.
That's Mr. Clickety, and my name is Leah, but I heard that I think I need a nickname.
Oh, I think so.
I think so too. So what we're gonna do, since I am brand new to Track Talk Live, we're gonna ask for some input from the community. So if you have an idea for a fun train-themed nickname for me, send it on over, and by the next time we'll have a nickname chosen so that I can have a matching mug.
Put your name on a coffee mug.
So that sounds like a plan for me. I'm very excited, and I'm excited to join the chat. So before we get into it, I have a few announcements. The first thing is we've got a free digital download coming your way. So you'll see a banner on your screen, or if you're watching on Facebook, this is going to be a link in your bio. It's called 10 Household Items Perfect for Scenery. So this is going to be a guide that provides you affordable way to add amazing scenery to your layouts. And you can either click on the banner or the link in the bio if you're watching on Facebook. Speaking of Facebook, we've got another announcement. We have an event going on tonight. We are going to premiere a layout tour of the Musselshell and Yogo Peak Railroad by Bill Briggs. That's 6 p.m. Central today. We have a preview of it rolling for you, and it's going to be on Facebook, but Doug, what can we expect with something like that?
Well, you know, Bill Briggs, I mentioned him before in other shows. He and I worked together for decades.
Yeah.
And he was like me. He was just born interested in trains. And he and I, not only did we build this model railroad together, but we also traveled the country together looking at real trains.
Yeah.
We were everywhere. And so it means a lot to me, this layout, because we put a lot of work into it.
Yes.
And it's about 1,500 square feet, so it's a huge layout.
Wow. That's a lot of space. Well, that's going to be at 6 p.m. tonight, Central Time. So if you get a chance, check us out on Facebook, give us a follow, and join us at 6 p.m. Doug, actually, what have you been up to now that we are into it?
We will go into some pictures
Yes.
in a bit. I actually, and I mentioned it at the last show that I was going to do this, but I was actually out to Wyoming and Utah for the 150th anniversary of the Golden Spike.
Yes.
And of course, everybody's seen the photograph of the two locomotives.
Mm-hmm. Meeting in the middle?
Meeting at Promontory, Utah, which is just on the north side of the Great Salt Lake. It's still kind of in the middle of no place. Yeah, 150 years later. But anyway, there was a lot of history that happened there, really changed the country. And so there was just massive crowds up there. They said actually at Promontory there were probably about 25,000 people. I think there were 50 tour buses that came from all over the place, plus a lot of private automobiles and everything.
All right.
So it really shows you the interest in not only the railroads in general, but the history of the railroads and how they've evolved. And so the Union Pacific, as part of this, had a big boy locomotive, which was a huge articulated locomotive. Probably a lot of our listeners are familiar, but it's actually the largest steam locomotive in the world.
Oh, wow.
And it sat in a park, in a railroad museum park, in Pomona, California, for close to 60 years.
And people could just go?
And you could go see it, but it was just sitting there, just dead, as a display. Well, the railroad decided that they wanted to have something to show for the 150th anniversary, because the Union Pacific Railroad's been around for 150 years. So anyway, they actually worked out a deal. They pulled it out of this park. It was quite the engineering feat to get it out of there on temporary track and get it out. And then they towed it with diesels all the way back to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where their shops are.
Oh, boy.
And they worked on it for years in this shop. Had to reproduce new parts. And of course, the neat thing nowadays with the technology that actually kind of 3D prints some of these parts and everything. And some of these parts are huge and weigh hundreds of pounds. And
I can imagine.
It's an amazing technology. So and of course, being as how the railroad had these locomotives built, they had the original plans from back when it was built during the late early 40s, I guess. I forget exactly what year. Early 40s when it was built, so they still have the plans. Mm-hmm. So they actually could go to the real plans and then say, okay, I need to have this part remade. So after close to 5 years, they had this locomotive all put back together and running again.
So is that how it got to the celebration?
And just in time, the inaugural trip was to Ogden, Utah. Of course, they can't go up to Promontory because there's no track there anymore. The track that is there is just a little bit. Actually, Promontory is a national park site now. Mm-hmm. So anyway, they have some reproduction locomotives up there. But the big boy made it to Ogden, and I've got some some pictures. But anyway, that was really cool to be, because I've loved trains my whole life, and to be part of this. I've been up to Promontory before, but not during a big celebration like this. So it was really cool to see everything. The whole town of Ogden, of course, that was a railroad town. So they had street parties and bands and vendors and food and everything, all because of the 150th anniversary.
Bring them all out.
Yeah. So it was really a big deal.
That's exciting.
So, well, I guess I can show my first picture. Now this was, now I met, well, the other part of the story is, and I think I told the folks before, but so I have a couple of friends from the UK, and there were people from all over the world, of course, that came to this celebration. Well, anyway, I met them in Denver. They flew into Denver, so I met them in Denver. We picked up a rental car there, and we drove up to Cheyenne, to the shops. So this would have been, like, say, the night before they were going to do this inaugural run with this locomotive. And so this is my buddy Lindsay. We're just standing around at the Union Pacific shops in Omaha, getting ready, or in Cheyenne, I mean, for getting ready for this big event. So, and this was when we got out on the road. This is my other buddy, Tom, and this is a big boy at, they stopped at all these are all railroad towns, of course, originally, because there was nothing out there until they built the railroad. So, I mean, these are, the railroad would stop at all these towns along the way, and they'd stop overnight, and anyway, these townspeople, the whole town had come out to see this locomotive. It was such a big deal. So this is my buddy Tom with the locomotive 4014. And I wanted to mention, too, the Union Pacific Railroad is, now that they've done this inaugural run, it was kind of a test run for the locomotive, So now that they've done the inaugural run, they're taking the locomotive around on tour of the entire Union Pacific system. And so I was just talking before the show that, of course, we're in Minnesota here. The locomotive is going to be here in Minnesota on the 18th. It'll be in St. Paul on the 18th. It'll be coming up from Iowa on the 17th, being at the St. Paul Union Station on the 18th, and then on the 19th it travels up to Duluth. And it'll be up in Duluth the 20th and the 21st on display. Making some rounds. Yeah, at the museum up there. And then after that, then it travels on toward, goes through Wisconsin on the way to Chicago. But anyway, if you want to Google the schedule, really all you have to do is go to 4014, that's a locomotive number, 4014 schedule, and it'll all pop up, the entire schedule. You can see the times and all that. So it'll stop at a lot of towns on its way through these states. Okay, so here's another shot just of the oops. Ooh, look, there. Made it bigger. Another shot of the locomotive. Just, it was really a sight to see. A lot of fans everywhere. Cars on the freeway, chasing the locomotive. So, and this is another one. I just thought I'd throw a diesel shot in there. There are a lot of diesel trains too, but there was a pedestrian walk bridge here, and we. This is the town of Green River, Wyoming, but the neat station there, classic old railroad station, and then diesels. Okay, diesels. And this is another shot now in. Actually, I think that I took this picture in. This might have actually been in Utah, but anyway, it gives you an idea. Now, they also brought their other operating steam locomotive along with them, the 844, which you can see. They have the yellow cars are additional water cars, because they have to, they're steam locomotives that have water for fuel. Or not for fuel, but to create the steam. Cool it down, right? And so anyway, they create steam. These are actually fired with diesel fuel now. They used to be coal, but now so they have a diesel fuel fire, and then they use a lot of water, so they bring along these yellow tenders for additional water. So you can see this in this picture. You can see the second steam locomotive there, and then the Union Pacific has a beautiful executive passenger train that goes with it. So you can see those yellow cars behind it there. So Union Pacific is really, I guess that's kind of maybe a bigger view of the same shot, but that I think that was in Weber Canyon in Utah. Those beautiful mountains there. Yes. And this was going upgrade here, so the locomotive was working pretty good. I wanted to show this. Now, as part of the trip, we went up to see the Ames Monument, and this is at the top of the Sherman Hill in Wyoming. It's the highest point on the Transcontinental Railroad, about 9,000 some feet.
That's pretty high.
Amazingly, it's not the Continental Divide. The Continental Divide is a little further west, but the actual Continental Divide is not as high. Kind of strange the way the geography worked out. But anyway, the Ames Monument was a dedication to the Ames brothers out of Massachusetts who supplied the tools and equipment to actually build the railroad.
Oh, wow.
So it's the Ames
there it
Monument,
is.
and I had my buddy stand there just to show the scale. I mean,
It's
it's huge, and it's these huge stone blocks. So anyway, that's something that we're seeing at the top of the grade on the Transcontinental Railroad. And I had to throw this in. We were in Douglas, Wyoming, so I had my buddies take my picture at the Douglas. That was
Not quite as large as the monument from the
no,
last
not quite as
picture.
large as the Ames Monument, but it's still stone, you know. I mean,
That's right.
So anyway, I had to take my picture. And this was, I just like taking pictures of executive cars. So this is the rear end of the executive train. You can see it has a nice open platform, like you'd see in the
Yeah.
old days, you know, where the presidential...
And they're waving off the back.
The presidents and politicians would be standing in the back end giving a speech. And so anyway, they have these beautiful cars, and that's the tail end of the train. So I just thought I'd show that one. And this actually is also part of this convention. The historical societies met, and the two railroads were the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific. But then the Central Pacific ended up becoming the Southern Pacific. So anyway, they had the Southern Pacific Historical and the Union Pacific Historical. And this is a guy who actually ran the big steam locomotives on the Southern Pacific, named Vince. And he comes to the conventions, and he likes to tell stories about the steam days on the Southern Pacific. And so that was me shaking his hand. He was a really neat guy. Great stories. Okay, now we're shifting gears here. I was also at the St. Paul Union Depot train days.
And when was that?
That was, but it's July now, isn't it? About a month or so ago. They do it every summer, and then they have up in the concourse, they have vendors and model train displays and all that. And then the real railroads bring in displays down where the Amtrak trains go through now. So anyway, this is a picture. Just decided to show these. Just a picture of the Union Pacific Power they brought in for display, and you know, kids love this. There's all these kids come over there, and it's neat to see these young kids interested in trains. I mean, trains aren't the same as they used to be. You know, they're kind of harder to get close to and everything now. But it's really wonderful for that they do things like this, because it's just a great thing for the kids. And so the kids can go down and see this real equipment, get really close to it, which you normally wouldn't do, because you know normally they don't want you to get too close to railroads anymore. They're afraid people may get hurt or something.
For good reason, I think.
So this is actually a locomotive from I think it was built maybe in the 70s, but it was brought down from the Duluth Museum. They actually, the Canadian Pacific towed it down all the way, this and a caboose, all the way down from the Duluth Museum for an exhibit here. So this one and the caboose that went with it, where people could actually walk through it. They'd let you walk
up and in.
walk right through, through the cab and back out, and then through the caboose. And so that's pretty neat. They let people actually
That would be amazing.
get inside of a real locomotive. And of course, it helps promote the Duluth Museum, which is a tremendous museum railroad museum we have here in Minnesota. So, yeah, this is another locomotive that was acquired by the 261 Steam Group. We have another guy in the Twin Cities here who actually operates a steam locomotive. Well, he also just bought this locomotive, and it'll be repainted. He does the Milwaukee Road, which is the orange and maroon, and so this will be repainted into orange and maroon, but it's actually an operating diesel from the 50s.
Wow.
That he'll use on excursion service. So I just took a picture of that because it's pretty neat. And it's so well done. Now we're shifting gears again.
All right.
I have a friend in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I met him here, and I've talked about him before. He's actually doing an N-scale model railroad depicting the Chicago Union Station back in the 1950s. And he's a real sharp guy. He's a computer guy. He's a PhD physicist. You know, software is nothing.
Very
you know, he can do. But when you're doing like even Chicago buildings from the 50s, lot of tall buildings, and like say,
Right.
you know, say you're building a model, there's a place called the Allerton Hotel, which is a really interesting building. And, you know, if you're going to build a model of that, you know, I don't know how many windows it had. Say it had 300-400 windows, I don't know, just guessing. But, you know, if you're going to build a model of that, you're going to build each window individually, you're going to build 400 windows. Well, anyway, now you can use the 3D printing and laser cutting and all that kind of stuff.
That would make it
and
easier.
you can make a building like that, a tall building, a lot easier than if you're going to have to make every window
That's right.
by itself. And so this picture is just, he just had everything sitting out. We're still working on the layout, and there's a lot more to be done, but he just basically set this out as basically as kind of a mock-up to just get to visualize what it's going to look like. And of course, you know, Chicago in those days was pretty gritty, and you know, and so that's the kind of what
Absolutely.
the aura he's trying to get there. So anyway, everything is just kind of sitting there loose, but that was kind of the idea of you know, what he was working toward. I've showed already has the model of the Chicago Union Station, which I've showed in previous shows. Whoops, I think I got something out of. Well, anyway, I got something out of sequence. I'll have to show it to you. I took a picture. He has a Cricut 3D or a laser cutter, I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I
Cutting
put that in. I
out
thought I put it in the right order, but I didn't. Okay, so it'll turn up.
We'll get back to it.
Now, here's another thing. I have a guy in town here who has just a tremendous amount of O scale. This is a quarter inch scale, quarter inch to the foot, 1/48 scale. And he has display cases full of this O gauge. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff made by some of the best people around and custom painted and everything. But I wanted to show a picture of this. This is a model of the 4014 Big Boy that he bought, I don't know, probably decades ago. But it's 1/29 scale, which is the scale that works to fit on the existing G scale track, like the track people see in the foreground here. But we always have this every show. But anyway, this is an absolutely beautiful model of the 4014 on 1/29 scale. So it's huge. I mean, this is longer than this table.
Oh, wow. And that's the same train that you had shown earlier, right? 4014?
Yeah, it just happens to be the 4014. He got this model, and it just happened to be the one that they restored.
Perfect.
So anyway, that's a pretty neat story. See, there it is.
Ta-da!
So I got it in the wrong order. That's the Cricut, and he's playing around with this and just kind of doing little things to practice on it, you know. So, but he's real excited about it.
I have a couple friends that have one of those, and they love them.
Really?
Yep, simple to use, and they're able to create some fun stuff.
Oh, cool. For like craft type things?
Yeah, crafting, little
nice.
designs and decals and things like that.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to show that. Now, this is getting back to the guy with the 4014 locomotive. He also had this was a system that was around before DCC, which I'll have to explain to you. You probably don't know what DCC is. But anyway, this is what's called an analog system that was actually computer operated, but not like the computer stuff you see today. Kind of real early computer stuff. And I just wanted to show this. So this is the O-scale layout, and this is the panel that we designed. This would be decades ago, probably 25 years ago. We did this panel. I just wanted to show you what it looked like. So it was real early computer graphics and everything. But I just thought it was a cool looking panel, so I wanted to show that. This is a portion of the. I just took a picture. This is the under the layout. This is a portion of the. No, I take that back. This is wrong. No, this is not a portion. This is back in North Carolina. I got these pictures mixed up. This is part of the new computer system that goes with the trains in North Carolina. And this buddy of mine, I just thought that was a funny picture. He wanted to test out his LEDs before he hooked them up to a panel, so he actually hooked up his LEDs before he did the panel.
Okay.
So you can see the LEDs lit up there. So I just thought that was kind of a funny
little
thing.
test.
And this is a picture of another model. This is a 1/4 inch again, so I got these a little bit out of order, but this is a beautiful model made by the West Side Model Company. It happens to be a West Side Lumber Company logging locomotive, which was a logging company out in California. But I just wanted to show this picture because it's an absolutely beautiful model in 1/48 scale, and we want to kind of talk about these other scales. You know, HO is the most common and also the most talked about, so we want to show some of these other scales. But absolutely beautiful 1/4 inch scale model. Okay, then this one is funny. Now, you know, we talk about scenery. Well, okay, my in-laws are from Manistee, Upper Michigan.
Okay.
You know, and this was a paper mill that was in Manistee, Upper Michigan. It's about halfway across the Upper Peninsula. And when I was up there for years, it was actually operating. Well, they took the truck portions off it, the wheel portions off of it. And I don't know if they intend to repair it or what they're going to do. But anyway, the poor thing, it just looks so sad like that. But I actually took the picture because it'd be a neat thing for scenery on a model railroad.
Oh, yeah.
You just do this as a piece of scenery. It's kind of neat. It's sitting on some timbers on the two ends, and it's getting all rusty and dilapidated looking. But I just had to take a picture of it. The poor thing. It'll probably never run again. And I just threw this in. This wasn't in my travels someplace, but I really like the weathering on this. Other shows we've talked about weathering and rusting metal buildings and all that. I mean, that's just a terrific example of weathering. I may have had a track spur. There's a dock outside. Might have had a spur at one time, but I don't even remember. I forgot where I even took this picture. But I just like that building. It's a great model. And this is. I'm not exactly sure why I threw this in. This is my layout.
Oh.
And it's depicting Riverside, California, basically. It's kind of
I was going to ask if it was California.
I love
It feels
California.
like California.
Yeah, and I actually have the Mercury with flames on the viaduct over there. You can see it on the very left. It actually has flames painted on it.
Ooh.
And then the truck, I forget what. Anyway, it's a Woody truck. And I have trolley track on the street for the Pacific Electric. I've shown other pictures of my layout too, but I just threw that in. Okay, so that is it. I'm done with pictures. So
All right.
if anybody has any comments or wants to say anything bad about my pictures or anything like that, they're welcome to
send them on in, or good.
Yeah,
or
if they want to say good things too. Yeah, sure.
We like those too.
Yeah.
We do have a couple questions rolling on in, so we're going to get to those in a moment. But I also wanted to remind you to follow Model Railroad Academy on social media. So you'll see on the screen where you're watching us, we've got Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Twitter. So any of those social media platforms, give Model Railroad Academy a follow. And again, reminder, on Facebook tonight at 6 p.m. Central, we have that event. So check it out tonight. That'll be really exciting.
It is exciting. It's a wonderful layout, and we'll have more pictures too.
Yeah.
In the future, so.
Are you ready to dig into some questions?
Well, sure.
All right.
Sure. I'm working on my brain here.
That's
so
right.
Get my brain warmed up now.
And some nickname suggestions are starting to roll in.
Right.
So maybe I'll toss out a few of them as we continue on through the questions. So that's exciting too. Our first question comes from Robert from Pompano, Florida. He's got an HO scale.
Super.
Yeah, so my HOs are constantly uncoupling, especially on turns and minor whoop-de-doos. I know.
That's a problem right there.
I really like that. Yeah. When my cars are coupled correctly, are the couplers supposed to be all the way closed or halfway? They don't close all the way on their own, and if they're supposed to be fully closed, how do you accomplish this other than needle nose pliers while they're attached?
Well, now he didn't say what brand or what type of coupler he's using. It kind of sounds like a knuckle type coupler because he says they're not closing all the way. And there are many brands of knuckle couplers out there, and some work better than others.
Oh.
And so I always use the KD, which was they were the original knuckle coupler, and I still think they're the best. And the metal couplers, I wouldn't touch a plastic coupler. Now the plastic couplers they just don't work as well. Now, if he's got a problem with a metal coupler like a KD, especially if your model railroad, if it's like maybe in a humid room. Now he's in Florida, so for example, humidity could affect. You could get a little bit of corrosion. I mean, they're talking pretty small moving parts there.
Yeah.
But you can actually buy powdered Teflon,
Ooh.
like it's a little tube with a little pointer tip. You can just a little squirt right in the knuckle there and loosen it up. So I'd recommend that if it's a metal KD coupler. That's the best way. I do that on my own too because they can get there's a little bit of corrosion in there. What also can happen too, a second thing is that there's a little coil spring in there that makes it go shut.
Oh, okay.
And then that coil spring can get funky. Well, if you got whoop-de-doos, you could get funky springs. So check your springs, and you may need you can buy extra springs from KD or any hobby shop or supplier or anything, but you may check and see if your spring knuckle is good and replace it with a new one. So
all right. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Alan. Alan is asking, why are most layouts mounted on a pink foam board? Is that necessary?
Well, in the old days we used plywood.
Oh.
I mean, there was no pink foam.
So
well, that's I go back a ways. You know.
So the pink foam
So-
is not necessary.
Well, I mean, the neat
Or is
thing
it
about pink
easiest?
foam, well, pink foam is easier. First of all, it's if you buy the thick foam, like the, well, say the 2 inch and a half or 2 inch foam,
Yeah.
it's pretty rigid.
Okay.
And it's much lighter than using lumber.
I would imagine, yes.
So you're still going to probably have a lumber frame
Yeah.
for it. But I would say that you know, the foam is kind of the way to go. And you can carve it. You can use like a serrated bread knife and carve gullies and riverbeds
that's helpful,
and
yeah.
things into it. Or you can buy from a craft store. You can buy a hot. You ever used in the craft stuff? You ever seen a hot knife?
No, I
It's
haven't.
like a nichrome wire that's hooked up to power. So it's like a very thin wire, but
you just
in like kind of a
slice
frame
through.
shape, and it gets hot, and you just go just like cutting butter, you know, right through it.
Oh, that sounds fun.
And so, I mean, I like foam. I mean, you still want to have some kind of a rigid, like a lumber frame kind of around the whole thing, and then some kind of legs and all that kind of stuff. But no, I think foam is great. The one thing that people, I think they complain about for foam is that it tends to be noisy. It's rigid, so it acts kind of like a speaker cone, and so
Oh,
it
yeah.
can be noisier when your trains are running, especially the bigger scales. But there's ways of getting around that. You can use, if you're using road bed, you can use cork or foam. Soft foam road bed, that type of thing. Homosode is another type of material. It's a compressed paper board that you can buy at lumber store, home
Right.
remodeling stores, and use that as a sound deadener. So that's what I would say. So I think foam is great nowadays, and it's
Pretty useful.
it's a lot easier than plywood overall. So.
Perfect. Well, let's move on to Barrett's question. Barrett is asking, I am going to create a football stadium display on my O-scale layout. Do you have any suggestions for where I can find accessories or any items I can use from around the house? Thanks.
Well, little miniature football players, you don't normally have them laying around the house.
Oh, you don't?
Well, I wouldn't
No,
think
I don't
so.
either.
But no, I mean, what I would say, you go to a toy store, you know, like a big toy store, and see what they have for, or go online. I don't know. I mean, if he's in 1/4 inch scale, O scale, I mean,
Yeah.
there might be something out there online that isn't a typical model railroad
Right.
thing, you know. So I would say, like a big toy store. I don't know what would be a good national, like Toys R Us. They're kind of out of business now.
Yeah.
But anyway, a big national toy store and just see what they have, or go online. Just put in 1/4 inch scale football players and see what comes up.
Yeah, that's what the internet is good for. Bill is asking, hi Doug, have you ever used decals to model asphalt roads when it comes to road striping, sewer covers, drains, etc.? I'm stumped as to how to do this realistically. Any advice?
Well, you know, we used to use decals in the old days, and it's kind of tough, especially because a road, decals are better on like a smooth, glossy surface. You know, if you're using like a flat coloring on the road, you know, microscopically that's like sandpaper. You know, it's not real smooth, and then the decals don't want to lay down perfectly and all that.
Right.
But what I do like to use nowadays is you can go to a hobby store or probably a craft store too, and buy what's called striping tape, and they use it on like on model airplanes or model cars or that type of thing. It's very thin tape, or narrow tape, I guess I should say,
Yeah.
narrow tape that comes in many colors.
Oh, okay.
And so you can actually, and what I've laid it, like say you want to do a yellow center line,
Right.
you know, it's tough, like, say you want to do a white with dashes, is what I'm
Yes.
trying to say. Yellow center line, you can just lay it straight. If you want to do dashes, I lay the whole thing in full first, and then because that way
Cut
you
out.
keep it straight, and then you can cut out sections so you have the dashes.
That's really useful.
And then when you're done, seal it all down with a flat, like a flat acrylic sealer, because it could, you know, over time it could peel back
Start
up
to
again.
peel up.
So go over it with a flat, like matte medium.
Ooh, I heard about this.
And then, of course, and you know, if the yellow, for example, is too bright, you want to kind of make it look dirty. And then once you have it sealed down with
Matte
matte
medium.
then you can go over it with weathering colors and kind
Yeah.
of dirty it up, you know, so it's not so bright.
Okay,
See what I mean?
nice. All right. Little decal action there. Dave is asking, I want to create the look of broken windows in one of my structures. Any suggestions on how to do this?
You know, I've seen decals for that.
Really?
But I mean, I've done it, you know, where you use like an acrylic plastic for window glass.
Okay.
You can actually take like a really sharp X-Acto knife.
Oh.
You know, and actually scratch it up, and
Yeah.
and you have to kind of draw in the cracks, pretty much. You could even cut out a section if you wanted a completely broken out piece. You could actually cut out. It's a lot of work.
Yes, that's
but
very
you could
detailed.
actually cut out bits, so it looks like cracks. And
Oh, right. That would take some time and some very,
yeah. But you know, if you wouldn't really hardly see it in the back of your
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be something you'd have right in the foreground. You know?
Perfect. All right.
So something that would really show off.
Perfect. I am going to share some of our suggested nicknames so far and let you see what you think about them so far. So we've got Miss Diesel,
Ooh, yeah.
Miss Locomotive, just Skipper, no Miss at all, just
Yeah.
Skipper, which is kind of fun,
yeah.
and Miss Amtrak.
Ooh.
Amtrak, separated. So Miss Amtrak, just a little play on the Amtrak, I think.
Track, yeah.
So that's what has come in so far. So keep rolling those in with your questions, and then we'll see the next time what we end up settling on. I'll unveil my new mug.
You know, you could probably get an Amtrak mug right from Amtrak. They actually, if you go on their site, they have
Probably.
you know, gifts that you can.
I'll just put the Miss on, in the front of it. Oh, okay. We have another question coming in from Brian. Brian wants to know, can I use brass and silver rail on the same layout, or does this cause connection issues?
Well, I mean, I really wouldn't. I mean, theoretically you could, you know, but you know, brass is kind of pretty much out of favor because of the conductivity problems from the oxidation. You get oxidation on brass; it's non-conductive, and so back in the old days. We actually, when we had brass track, you know, you're always cleaning it. You had to get a abrasive block and clean it off all the time because it just, you know, your trains didn't want to run because of the oxidation, and especially, you know, you being new to this, you know, here's another axiom of model railroading.
Okay.
It never goes bad in the front. Like, it always goes bad in the worst possible place that you can't get to, right? You know?
Of course, probably.
So here you are, you know, like hanging from the ceiling and a rope or something, trying to, you know,
fix something,
trying to reach in and clean your track over some mountains or something like that.
Oh boy!
You know, forget it. So I mean, the track isn't that expensive. I mean, did he say what scale he was in?
He did not.
You know, I would just buy new nickel. I mean, pretty much everything is nickel silver now, which is just so much easier to work with, and it actually looks more like real track because it's silver. Now, people weather their track. I mean, normally you wouldn't see the silver side of the real track, so you can spray. We've talked about that too, in weathering, but you know, spray weathering the side of your rail, and then you just clean off the top so you have conductivity. So you spray the track with weathering paint, and just take an abrasive block and clean off the top, so only the top part is silver.
Ooh, I think that you were sneaking into the next question because that is the next question. What is one of your favorite weathering techniques? This comes from a viewer on Facebook.
For what? For track or for?
Period. Just favorite weathering techniques.
Yeah.
Dig in.
Well, you know, I tell you what, I like to mix it up because you don't want it all to look the same. I mean, you know, in real life things look different, so you don't want to like say there's. Start with maybe just hand brush painting, earth color, earth tones, and then you can go to, say, India ink weathering, and then say you could go to chalk weathering, and then there's airbrush weathering, and and then basically, you know, wherever we showed a picture of that building that was weathered too. Weathering looks different in different parts of the country too, depending on, you know, what the dust looks like and all that kind of stuff. And so you don't want to, if you have a boxcar that's been all over the United States, you know, it's not necessarily going to look the same as a boxcar that's been in some other part of the United States. So you want to do a variety. I mean, I like experimenting too, and then different, of course, depending what you're weathering on. Are you weathering on plastic? Are you weathering on wood? Are you weathering on metal? So there's a lot of variety there, and I would say, you know, we've talked about weathering before in previous shows, and so I would say, you know, if you have a specific question, like say, what about weathering a building or something, that's why I like to bring in these weathered pictures or weathered real buildings too, just to show what you can do. So yeah, send in a specific question, and we'd love to talk about that.
Yes,
and we'll bring in samples of weathering materials.
Ooh, that would be exciting. We have another question here about stucco. So this is a guest asking, do you have any tips for making stucco walls on structures?
Well, I actually have stucco buildings in my layout because I'm modeling in California.
Perfect.
And, there's different ways you can actually mix up a little bit of matte medium with a grit and then put a color in there for the kind of the color you want. You can do that's what people used to do in the old days.
Okay.
To get like very fine like sand type of material, very fine particles. Like beach sand is usually pretty good.
Oh, okay.
Really pulverized, so you can get really fine sand. But now you can go to Michael's, and what I did for my buildings, you go to Michael's and buy the stuff that already has the texture in it. Of course, I can't remember what they call it anymore. But you buy it. It's for artwork, and it already has the texture. So all you do is shake it up and paint it on, and bingo, you got stucco.
Ta-da! Stucco walls.
And if you want to change, you can add color to it too, depending.
Right.
It comes in kind of a creamy color, but then if you want to, you can make the color, make it any color you want by adding acrylic paint colors.
Oh, that's nice. All right, we have another guest asking, how do you make realistic water that looks like it's moving?
Ooh.
That sounds tough.
Well, you start with
a glass medium. Ta-da! I'm going to learn. This is going to be so fun. Glass medium?
Well, that's what we use for a bit. Now, in the old days, of course, we used other stuff that's harder to work with. But actually, the neat thing about acrylic mediums is that they're well, first of all, they're acrylic, so they're water-based and they're easy to work with. And there's also a gel consistency that's more like frosting or something, so you can brush it on. And so, to really get the illusion that water is moving, you can't really use real water because real water doesn't really scale down.
No,
it looks real water looks too
stay where you want it sometimes.
Well, but that it's even like the ripples in real water are too big and everything. So you really have to kind of be creative and theatrical with it. And so if you do layers, you can start out with what?
Another nickname.
If you do layers, then you can create that feeling of depth by putting like darker colors in the center, and it's more transparent in the shoreline, that sort of thing. And then you can put put rocks in there, and then put foam in.
Oh yeah.
So you have like foam, and then a trail of foam behind the rocks of the rippling water. Or same thing with waves. You can actually do wave tips with the gel medium, and so you can actually take the gel and kind of whip it up, like you're putting frosting on a cake.
Right.
You whip it up and do the waves, and then because it's acrylic, you have a lot of time to work with it. You can kind of shape it the way you want it, and you don't have to do it all in one coat. You can actually, start with a little bit and see how you like it. And if you want to add more, you can add more, and then you can add color as you go, and so that it's sort of, if you want a deeper water, it's sort of semi-transparent, where you can actually.
Oh, like see
kind of sort of see through it, but not completely. And like people throw like old tires.
Yeah.
Old tires in the water, or a dock in the water, whatever is that kind of thing.
That would be awesome.
And then so if you want something that's buried in the water, then you just actually put it in, and then just keep adding layers around it as you go until it's buried. So.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I like is start out with
glass medium.
Glass medium.
Ta-da! All right. How tall do you recommend a backdrop to be immersive? Robert is asking.
Well, that's pretty subjective. It depends on your layout, first of all. Your layout, in theory, from a theatrical standpoint,
right?
It should be about chest high, because when you're looking at your model trains, it should really be at eye level. If your layout is too low, it's like you're in an airplane looking down at it.
Yeah.
But of course, there's always a lot of, depending on what kind of ceiling you got and blah, 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 all this stuff. And accessibility over the top. When your layout's high, then it's harder to access and everything. So, there's a lot of variables, but the backdrop should certainly be above your eye level, because your eye is going to, when you're looking at real scenery, your horizon is at your eye level.
Right.
So it has to be above eye level. And then, of course, people will actually cove the ceiling corner.
So it curves up and over a little bit?
Yeah, from vertical up to horizontal, so you don't have that crack up there, the square corner at the top, to even accentuate that backdrop. So it's all, I guess you could look at it. In this particular layout, you just put up a panel, just take a piece of masonite, say, whatever, 2 feet high. Get a 2x4 piece of masonite over at Home Depot, paint it up sky blue, and just stand it up there loose.
Yeah.
And see what you think. And then if you want to try it a little further, paint just kind of a sort of a random sort of a backdrop on there, then look at that and see what you think and go from there.
All right.
Everything's going to be hazy, of course, because it's the backdrop, so there's not a lot of detail. It's going to be reinforcing the distance, so it's going to be hazy.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Jack O says,
Jacko,
help!
Jacko!
I know. I can't keep dust out of my train room and it's gunking up the works. How do I minimize this and clean the dust safely off of my layout track? Thanks, love the show.
Well, make sure to put in a new vacuum cleaner bag to start with.
Yes, yes, very key.
Well, first of all, depending on where your layout is, I mean, you know, in the old days, again, people would build a layout in the basement of their house and have an open joist in the ceiling, and all the dust would filter down, and you know that was no good. So anyway, nowadays people are building layouts in finished rooms, of course. So theoretically, you shouldn't have a whole lot of dust just filtering down from up above, but if you have a particular problem with dust, you can certainly buy a freestanding air filter.
I was just going to ask about an air filter.
Like over at Home Depot again or someplace like that. Just put in a freestanding air filter under your layout and keep the air circulating through this air filter, and that'll certainly help.
I had one in my apartment. I did not have a train set, but when I was living in New York City, I had an air filter, and it really minimized the dust in my apartment. I think that would be pretty great.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
New York City is cool for trains, too.
There's a few. There's a few in the city.
Grand Central Station, hey, it's okay. Yeah.
All right, here's the other suggestion that rolled in. We've got Miss Toot Toot. As
Miss Toot Toot?
Miss Toot Toot. As another, that was, I got a little chuckle out of that while you were answering one of the questions.
Well, here, it's, you know, your choice.
We're just adding them to the list,
we'll put them on the list,
accumulating as we go.
Maybe you just like put them on the wall, a list on the wall, and throw a
dart
or something.
We'll see what it lands on. I like it. John is asking, ooh, I like this one. I have a bunch of hotel room shampoo bottles from a recent trip. Can you think of any ideas for recycling these as scenery for his layout?
The bottles?
Yeah.
Well, you know, people do use, you know, I suppose you could, it depends on the shampoo bottle, but they use them for, like, say, round tanks, like oil tanks or fuel tanks or something like that. And, you know, paint them silver or black or whatever the tank would be. And then sometimes you can use multiples, you know, and get kind of weird shapes and stuff on them. And, you know, sometimes you have vertical oil tanks, and other times there are horizontal tanks with legs. And so, yeah, I mean, I've actually used wine corks.
Really?
For a small fuel tank.
Oh, right.
On legs. And there again, well, first of all, you seal it.
Okay.
With a sealer, so you know you don't want the cork to show through, so you seal it, and then and before drink the wine first.
Okay, I like this.
Yeah, and
Step
then use
one.
the cork after you're done, and then you can, once you seal it, then you can paint it any color, red or black or silver or anything.
And place it in.
Yeah.
All right. John, looks like a different John, is asking, I heard a good source for historical railroad data is their requirement to report their assets for insurance purposes. Is that true, and where can he find this data?
Well, there are historic, certainly historic plat maps that would be through probably through the city or county, you know, and there also were fire insurance maps where the fire insurance people would have a complete diagram of a railroad facility just for fire insurance purposes. So I think it was Sanborn. Was it Sanborn was the name of the people that did the fire insurance maps? But if you're interested in a particular site, now he didn't say what railroad he's interested in, but you know, the railroad historical societies, I mean, every railroad has a historical society. And so if you're interested in a particular town or a particular railroad, just go to the Railroad Historical Society, because if anybody's going to know about that stuff, they will.
Yeah.
And just say, okay, I'm interested in, you know, wherever it is, Green River, Wyoming, and you got any historical maps? And then somebody might say, sure.
Oh, perfect.
Because these historical societies catalog all that stuff.
That's right. Probably a treasure trove of information.
Yeah.
All right, Daniel is asking, Doug, what is your favorite unconventional material to use in your layout? Mine is coffee stir sticks.
That is so funny because we got kind of carried away one time. We were at a show in, I think it was in Springfield, Massachusetts, and we got talking about that, and the flat little sticks that they, you know, that they use for coffee sticks are just perfect for making, you know, because they're kind of rough wood anyway, for grade crossings at old dilapidated buildings, and so we kind of sort of went a little loony and went to every coffee booth in the whole place and like grabbed a, you know, bought a cup of coffee, then grabbed about 20 sticks, you know. So I have a lifetime supply of coffee stirring sticks, but and I do save them because now you also I'd say popsicle sticks.
Oh, that would be.
Different kinds of wood sticks because they're handy. Not only are they handy for modeling, but they're for like glue applicating. And,
Okay.
that kind of thing. And then the plastic tubes. The plastic, the plastic tube stirring sticks.
Oh, yeah.
And I save those too because I use those for downspouts on buildings.
Okay.
Or actually sometimes for a conduit, if you're running a wire up to a light in a building and you don't want to actually have the wire show, you can actually put the wire in one of these little tubes and use it like a conduit. So
nice.
Yeah, the other thing is model railroaders really like free stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I was talking not too long ago, maybe the last couple of months, I actually used wooden chopsticks for these are the round ones for a pole load.
Nice.
And the neat thing is they're already tapered. Uh-huh. So they really look like a pole.
Right.
And so, let's go to the Chinese restaurant. Oh, well, here, let me just grab a few.
You get Chinese food and material.
So there you go. So that's the neat thing about model railroading. You always keep your eyes open for any kind of weird thing. It's like we were talking about the products from home.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, they're free, basically.
Right.
And then secondly, you're using them for a completely different purpose than they're intended for. So that's a neat thing. You just keep your eyes open. You might be walking along and see something laying on the sidewalk. Oh, hey, I can use that.
Get a little creative.
Yeah. So save stuff. And model railroaders have probably way too much of that stuff. But I bought all these little parts boxes, the little plastic cubes kind of things with parts, and so I save all that stuff. And
you never know when it's going to come in handy.
Oh yeah, hey, I can use this for something.
Perfect. I like it. All right, we've got Randy on Facebook asking, how would you ballast Easy Track?
Well, I'll tell you what I do, and I think I mentioned this before on other shows, but Easy Track goes on this plastic kind of a road bed, so it's like this and goes up, and then the track's on the top, elevated road bed. Okay. And it's kind of a road bed look, but it's it's slippery because it's well, I don't know, it's just slippery plastic. So anyway, you can actually, before you glue it down, you want to put some kind of, you can just use regular primer. You could probably, actually, come to think of it, you could probably use that stucco type of material from Michael's and paint that on first just to give it a base.
Multi-use.
And then what I do is when I ballast it, I do the sides first because when you use the matte medium to glue the ballast down, you're going to use a spray water with a little bit in a plant spray bottle with a little bit of like liquid soap in there to break down the surface tension. But if you try to do the whole thing at once, it'll wash down the sides. And so I do the sides first. And so I do one side, and I take brush down the matte medium with a little paintbrush on the side, and then sprinkle the ballast on there, and then I hit it from kind of a side angle, kind of a square with the side of the roadbed to wet it down. To get the ballast to adhere. And then of course you can always do more than one coat, but I do the two sides first, and then you can come down the middle and do that last because you're going to come down from the top, and then it doesn't matter if the water washes down then because it's already glued down.
You've got the starting point.
So it's kind of a multi-step process, but
pretty nice.
Anyway.
All
that
right.
works.
We've got Lone Wolf 777 on YouTube asking, I have a question. Do you use a Dremel rotary tool by any chance, Doug? I just got one and started to use it to get rid of that mock Katie air hose so I can put the Magnalock air hoses in. Oh, cool. Well, I have multiple sizes of Dremels actually for big, if it's a G-scale track like this or small stuff, and I use that 409 cutting disc a lot for cutting small track. But, I'll tell you what, I cut the air hose off of HOKDs, but I don't use a Dremel. It's too easy to mess it up and and so you know what I mean. So anyway, what I just use, I have a Xuron rail nipper, a big size one for a bigger size rail, and I just clip it with that. It's just a side cutter, flush side cutter, and you're done. Ta-da! I like this. All right, I'm learning a lot today. Yeah, a Dremel's good if you're doing like at-home dentistry or something like that, Perfect. So it's always handy for a lot of stuff. Save yourself a trip to the office. Peter Johnson is asking, I plan to build an N-scale model based on an early American mining site in the Rockies. I am unable to locate a suitable steam engine and rolling stock. Any assistance with the manufacturer would be appreciated.
Well, I'll tell you what, N scale is tough because it's so small. And especially if you're doing a small little mining locomotive, it's extra small. And the neat saving thing is, though, there's some of these miniature motors nowadays. It's unbelievable, these little tiny motors. And so what you might have to do is find there's a Japanese source. My buddy Don in North Carolina is actually using a very small motor for, this would be N scale in the Chicago elevated.
Oh, okay.
So the elevated cars are going to be small compared to a regular railroad car.
Exactly.
So there's these little tiny motors, and they come, I think his came from Kato, the Japanese manufacturer. And he just bought the drive only. There's a way of buying the drive only. And if you're real interested, I could get the information and let you know about that. But if you probably have to like home make your own locomotive. I don't know if you can buy one ready built. Maybe from you could certainly search it online and see if there's something in N scale that would be ready to go in a little mining locomotive.
All right. We've got a question from Jeff. Jeff, I just got a Scale Trains GE C39 8DCC/sound. Did I say all of that right?
Sounds pretty good.
All right.
Yeah.
So it seemed a little whiny at top speed, so I thought I would remove the shell and see if it looked lubed up. I never removed the shell before on any of my locos. I'm new to the hobby. Scale Trains is really easy to remove, though. Anyway, I put the shell back on, and then the loco was doing this jittery wobble around turns and turnouts, and it was derailing. Did I imbalance something?
It might have been, I wonder, it might have been something in the gear towers. You have the motor is inside the body, and then there's shafts that go down, and it sounds to me like there might be something binding in the gear tower. Like maybe sometimes when you put the shell on, you can, there's wires in there, and so the wire can get kind of in the wrong place, and as the truck goes around the curve, it would snag on the wire, loose wire, and that kind of is what it sounds like. I doubt if he did anything to the trucks. I mean, he could certainly set the trucks down or something flat and make sure all 6 wheels are touching. It's not cockeyed. But I think it's inside the shell from the sounds of things. There's something hanging up in there.
All right. Well,
so you may have to take the shell back off again.
Hopefully that's a good fix.
Always test it before you put the shell on. When you do anything like that, test it before you put the shell on, just to make sure that it runs well before you do the shell.
Perfect. All right, let's move on. Mick Track 45 says, I'm designing my track plan for my N-scale layout on paper and was wondering if a computer program existed that would allow me to create and save on my computer my track plan. I have several N-scale track planning books which have been helpful, but I would like something more useful than my sketches.
Well, there are track plan softwares out there.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, being old-fashioned that I am, I'm sort of a pencil and paper guy, but there are softwares out there. What I would do is try to get a hold of maybe some other N-scale modelers in his area. There's probably a club or something. Did he say where he was from?
It doesn't say where he's from, no.
Probably other N-scale modelers in the area and talk to them and see what they have to say. Are there any recommendations?
Yeah.
Or, there are N-scale conventions. If you really want to go crazy, you can go to national or regional conventions for N-scale and talk to those people. Or,
get some information that way, yeah. All right, we have a guest asking, Doug, do you prefer to use natural materials on your layout or artificial? And what do you think is easier?
Ooh, well, actually, natural materials are always I shouldn't say always, mostly the best.
Okay.
And back in the old days, there's so much fancy scenery stuff around now, but back in the old days, I was saying how Bill Briggs and I would travel over the country.
Yeah.
Well, funny thing, okay, so we'd buy a Gatorade. This is a true story. Gatorade.
Yeah.
Wide mouth, Okay, we'd drink the Gatorade, and then we'd save the bottle, because then we'd see some neat gravel or something somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And so the wide mouth, you just put it in of course, at the airport, they thought we were nuts, bringing these jugs of gravel back. But, because you get different grits and different colors and all that. So I love definitely natural materials. Sometimes you just can't get the right stuff and you have to use model materials. And there are, there's some good stuff out there. But Scenic Express is an outfit that's probably they have the most unique supply. It's they're a supplier of scenery materials.
Oh, right.
Scenic Express. They have probably the most unique supply of scenery materials. You could probably find just about anything there from them. And they also sell a lot of natural materials.
Oh, that's nice.
But
You can't collect by traveling
but
around.
you know, it's good. So tell your wife, well, I have to go to California to get some gravel. You know,
You just I mean,
yeah, you know, so
you do what you got to do.
yeah. Whatever works.
Dwayne is trying to find info on the Illinois Central Gulf that ran through my hometown. Do you have any info on that?
What's his hometown? He didn't say.
Didn't say.
Well, there again, okay. Now there's an Illinois Central Historical Society, and
Right.
probably a sub group that's the Illinois Central Gulf Historical Society. And so I would contact those people and say, okay, I want to model such and such a town, and I'm looking for information, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that could help them. You could certainly contact that town. Too.
Right.
I mean, the town itself, in
Might
their,
have some.
you know, they may have plat maps and things in their, you know, at their city hall. So that would be another way to check it.
All right, I think we've got time for one more question, maybe two. So
Okay.
we're going to go to Mitchell W. Not having any luck finding N-scale styrene sheets or anything similar for a red brick wall. Thinking of printing on paper and gluing to foam. Do you have any pointers? I need to scratch build 2 one-story brick building and 1 two-story building. I am modeling my old hometown in 1940.
Cool, I like it. Well, you know, there's where your laser cutter is perfect because you can actually, you don't have to cut all the way through. You can actually cut mortar lines and do, you know, endless amount of brick that way.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
We've also found on Donza in North Carolina that once you get so far back, you can't tell whether it's 3-dimensional or not.
Okay.
And he's probably going to use 2-dimensional brick, just printed brick on those warehouse buildings in the background.
Oh, further back.
Because the mortar line is so small in N scale.
yeah.
I mean, you see it in the foreground, but in the background, you never know anyway.
Oh, well, good luck. All right, last one. Lone Wolf 777 is asking, hey, Doug, what is your favorite railroad to model after?
Okay, well, everybody knows, well, most everybody
I
knows
don't
out there.
know.
But
We're gonna
no,
find out.
I love California. I was out there, I had an uncle out there in Oakland when I was a kid. And I went out there with my parents and I've got to talk fast because they're getting to the end. Went out with my parents in the car. You know, you drove out there in those days, no freeways. And I saw the Southern Pacific going over Donner Pass, and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm doing Southern Pacific. So I've done Southern Pacific my entire life, even though I live in Minnesota. Model of Southern Pacific. I've been on just about everywhere you can think of on the entire Southern Pacific system, from New Orleans to Portland, Oregon. And a member of the Historical Society, of course, and so that's it. I love the Southern Pacific, and diesel and steam, and everything about it. So I have every book that's been printed on the Southern Pacific, and all of that.
All right, well, that's the favorite railroad. With that, that brings us to the end of the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Work.
A good welcome to the Model Railroad Academy. So this has been Track Talk Live. We've got Mr. Clickety, Doug, signing off with the coffee mug. My name is Leah, and I will have a nickname by the next time we see you next. So join us again for some Track Talk Live, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, folks.